Everyone, I don't wish to oppose Rosa, but I think I have a great need to introduce myself. I looked around yesterday, I spent the whole day here yesterday, and I've been totally intrigued by the papers that have been given by the people here. And I noticed a lot of young people on their computers and everything else, and I thought, well, how many of them are actually going to know who David Yip was and what the Chinese detective was? So I'm just going to briefly say this. I've been an actor for 42 years. I left drama school in 1973. And the Chinese detective is quite important, actually, in the history of the portrayal of the Chinese people and also minorities in this country. And it's 25 years, virtually, since it was made. So I can understand that most of you will not even know what we're talking about. In brief, basically, as a young actor, I left drama school in 1973, so 3 years later, I had the opportunity to suddenly appear in a major television series on the BBC. And in those days, we didn't have multi-channels now, we only had about 3 channels. Up till then, I had no real role models in terms of acting. I come from Liverpool, come from a big family, working class family in Liverpool, and for some reason, because of time restraints, I won't try and go too much into it, I ended up in the theatre, and to this very day, I wake up every morning, and when I'm working, I think, my God, someone's paying me to do this, and I love it. I like most of it anyway. I left drama school, and I made a very clear decision when I left drama school. I'd come out with a bag of tools to work with in my career, but I really didn't know how to act very well. And I decided to just do theatre for the first 7 years. Because quite honestly, in my youth and everything else, I'd never really seen people like me on a screen. Or if I had, basically there were people I did not want to know. You know, there were gangsters or whatever, or like we've been seeing today, you know, the classic Chinese villains. And the theatre allowed me to play across the board. I played a lot of classical theatre and everything else. So it gave me great grounding. But eventually, of course, as a young actor, you've got to move on, you start doing television. The first television part I played a South American Indian in a play called Savages, which was fine, it's fine, okay. But when I looked around on my television screen, you know, as I say, there was no positive imaging of people from the Chinese community, and certainly no leading character. The only leading character I'd ever seen, there's a film called The Inn of the Sixth Happiness, and Bert Kwok played a leading role in that as a very young man. And I know Bert very well now. I think he's basically retired now because he's too old, but it was a stunning part for him to play, and sadly he never played a part like that again, but he made a lot of money doing Pink Panthers, so you know. Anyway, in 1980 I got a phone call from my agent to go to the BBC in Shepherd's Bush, and they're making a new detective television series. Now I didn't break into a sweat. I thought, okay, they're going to see me for some sort of drug dealer, you know, triad guy or whatever. So I went along, cool as ice. Went into this room, met Ian Kennedy Martin, the writer, Terry Williams, the producer. The BBC was very white. Only non-white people you saw with the commission, the guys in the front desk or on the car park. Anyway, over a conversation lasting about 3/4 of an hour, I went from ice cool to basically a gibbering wreck, because I suddenly realized they were talking about making a drama program about a Chinese detective. And as I say, up till this point, there had never been such a positive role. So I had this very nice interview, I got over my shock, they gave me a script, and I went away and read this script. And whereas I'd been as cool as cucumber, I got into this lift to go down, and I met all these other actors waiting at the bottom, and of course I blew their cool by telling them, my God, you know what this is about? And so, this is about a Chinese detective. So basically they were gibbering wrecks when they went upstairs. Anyway, I got the job. Ian Kennedy Martin had written the first episode. It was about a British-born Chinese. His parents were Chinese. He was in the East End of London, and he joined the police and become a detective. Now, to be quite honest with you, officially at that time, I was underhyped. I think I get away with it now, but I was underhyped, but we worked around that. His story, the first thing Ian Kennedy Martin said to me, he said, you know, this guy is never going to do martial arts. Because my biggest worry was, because I've seen American programs where the guys do martial arts. He said, no, this guy will never do martial arts. You know, he uses his brain. He's clever. You know, if you get two big burly guys come at him, he'll run. Go around the corner, pick up a brick and mow the head with it when they come around the corner, something like that anyway. So I thought, great. And Ian and I worked together over the build-up to the thing, and he really made this character a very rounded character. His father, in the series, his father was a guy who'd been put in prison by a corrupt policeman years and years before, when the young John Ho was a boy. Sorry, the character's name was John Ho. And the shot of that killed his mother. He had a sister, and they lived in the East End. He was nothing special in terms of, he wasn't a great romantic, he didn't get the girls or anything like that. He was just jogging, a working hard policeman. But he wanted to revenge his dad. And so I was speaking yesterday about righteousness, how the Chinese, despite what's happened in the West and modernization, there's this feeling of the Chineseness of righteousness. And I actually feel that now as myself over the years after getting older, much older. So one thing, it's a sense of righteousness, and this character had that righteousness. Anyway, I also must preface also by saying this: the only program that really pissed me off when I was a kid was a program called Charlie Chan. Does anyone know what Charlie Chan is? It's an American television program. It was about a detective. Charlie Chan was a Chinese detective, and he had all these sons. They were all numbered, number 1, number 2, number 3. That's what they were called. The thing is, the guy who played Charlie Chan wasn't Chinese, so he was an American guy, and they did his face up. And when I went to school in Liverpool, I lived right next to the Chinese community, Chinatown in Liverpool. My mother was English, my dad was Chinese, and he was a merchant seaman. So I didn't really know I was Chinese in Liverpool until I passed my 11 plus and went to high school, and I had to leave because Chinatown in Liverpool was right in the city centre. So I never had to get a bus or anything like that. My whole life was there. Then I had to get on a bus and go 5 miles out of the city, where I just met very white people actually. And then I started to become aware of being Chinese. But whenever, the morning after Charlie Chan was on television, all the kids in the playground would start slanting their eyes and doing funny accents. And I'm going, what's that about? What's that about? What's that about? So Charlie Chan and I didn't have a great relationship. And so the opportunity to do something like The Chinese Detective was amazing, really. The BBC gave it 6 episodes to start off because they didn't really want to do it. But Ian Kennedy Martin had a good track record. He'd made successful programs, so they thought, let him have a go. And we made it. It was very successful. And the BBC got the most amazing press for it. If you go back through the cuttings, you'll see, Charlie Chan is dead. Look how wonderful we are. We're moving forward and doing this and doing that. And it was great. And we made a second series about a year later, so we did 14 episodes. So, as I say, it's 25 years since we made Chinese Detective. Now, I can put my hand on my heart, and I'll say to you, I'll challenge you. You tell me another program, not just for BBC, any of the filmmakers in this country who've ever put a Chinese or East Asian actor, man or woman, as a head of a television series again. There haven't been. That's a sad thing, it's a sad indictment. And to add salt to the wound of that, actually, the 2 series of Chinese Detective finished, and I've got to say, Chinese Detective went out in the most prime spot. The prime spot to start off with was Sunday night. I think it was 9 o'clock on a Sunday night, and you'd get 10, 12 million people watching. And we had that slot. And I even appeared on the front of the Radio Times, because my mother carried it around Liverpool for about a week, assaulting strangers with it, going, that's my son. But the week after the second series finished its first run, what did they show on television? Charlie Chan. And I thought, oh no. So the title of this is Thinking Chinese. And in the ongoing 42 years of being an actor, and I've been very fortunate, I have been incredibly fortunate. I've worked a lot, I've worked around the world, I haven't done all the kind of work I want to do. But my saddest thing, and it's affected the way I think of myself as Chinese, because I'm British Chinese, and a lot of the conference has been about histories and where certain things have come from. But my objective and my point of this talk is to talk about being how I feel and how I think British Chinese do think. Vivian was talking yesterday about her experiences being brought up the same way. The one thing we lack as a community, or one of the biggest things we lack as a community, we talked about the academic success, we talked about the business success, but I've talked a lot, because the other thing was, of course, when I became a Chinese detective, I was suddenly, I was everywhere. And whereas the Chinese community kept very quiet, suddenly I was asked to speak to them, sorry, not speak to them, I was asked to speak at groupings, I opened things, I went in, and I was happy to do it. I was happy to do it. But with great respect, I was very conscious that actually, in those days, and we're going back 25 years, they didn't actually like me as such. As far as they were concerned, I actually wasn't Chinese, because I didn't speak Chinese. I wasn't one of them. And quite often, in the first 5 minutes of a conversation, because Chinese are very blunt, they, are you married? How much do you earn? I've got a nice daughter, blah, blah, blah. But they say, why don't you speak Chinese? This is terrible. How are you going to, you'll never get married, blah, blah. And I would have really worried about it. I think, oh, God, and I did try, I have tried, and I had to explain. But over time, as I got more confident with them, I started to think, listen guys, as a community, as I say, you're successful academically, in business, but actually you're crap everywhere else. You've got no power, you don't seem to want power, you'll do things for your family and everything else, but basically you're in a little circle and you don't go outside. Now obviously things have changed and generationally it has changed. But as far as I'm concerned, and we've got other representatives from our profession, my profession, we've lacked our own real voice. Now, Chinese Detective, don't get me wrong, was superbly written. And I played the Chinese Detective. My dad, funny enough, was played by a contemporary of Kenneth Lowe's. He was a wonderful man. And that was great. I mean, you saw, for the first time, a positive role within a family. My father was always going at me, going on at me, but that was okay. That's a typical family's father or something. But as I said, we didn't really see that again. So over the 42 years, one of my biggest frustrations as being an actor was that the lack of writing, directing projects which really meant something to me. And again, I'm being not being too churlish, I got bored of white directors, white producers saying, I've got this fantastic idea, we're going to do this thing about China, we're going to do this thing about this, And I'm going, yeah, but what about the guys in Liverpool and London and Birmingham? They might have stories about, like that. And they didn't really, It's okay, you play the guys. There was one real turning point in my career. I went for a casting, this is after I'd become a Chinese detective, so I was well known. I went for a casting for a television series, and this young white director was absolutely pleasant and intelligent in every way. But we sat down, and after a 20-minute conversation, he said to me, you're not really Chinese, are you? And I said, and what he meant was, obviously, I wasn't his image of what he wanted to be Chinese. I didn't speak the language, blah, blah. And I went out to that room then, and I thought, sod this, I'm fed up with this. I'm not, people want to put me in a box. Want to put us in a box, and it's an image, it's a face that they want, a sound that they want, whatever. But actually, you're not giving me, people like me, a chance to be what we are. So, that idea of wanting to have my own voice, I'm reluctant to call myself a writer, but I've written and made 3 documentaries about my local area in Liverpool. And funny enough, the very first one, I got Ken Lowe to come up and talk about his time there, and that was the most wonderful experience. Because of time, I won't go into that too much. But eventually, I made 2 big decisions in my life, I suppose it's because I've never actually done this job because I wanted to earn loads of money. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to earn loads of money if you want to give it to me, but it wasn't my number one thing. To me, to act was just a great privilege. To act with other actors was a great privilege. To act with people who, to be with people who have great talent was a great privilege. And so I always chose the really interesting projects, and they usually turned out to be the really crappily paid projects. But occasionally a film would come along, or a thing, and you'd do it and you earn some money. But I decided that I was not going to do crap anymore. After the Chinese detective, I had reluctantly become a bit of a role model, because there weren't any real other role models. I'd become a role model. I just thought, I don't want another kid to go to school one morning and say, that guy played the Chinese detective, did you see him playing that stupid idiot the other day, that stereotypical Chinese guy or whatever. I didn't want to do that. So I just started turning down work. And I moved out of London, which helped, I've got to say, because I'm not going to make the way to London, I wanted to do it for something else. But eventually, having talked to the Chinese community and harangued them about, opening up and everything else, I suddenly thought, what I really got to do? I've got to write something about the thing that really troubles me most, and that was the relationship with my dad. I'm one of 8 children. My dad came over from China in 1941. He a totally uneducated guy, but he survived his thing. He married my mum, a local girl, and had 8 children. That was the best thing he ever did. It's 8 children. And I always used to say to my dad, because he didn't like being in Liverpool. He didn't like being in England, really. He wouldn't go back to China. He wouldn't go out. And in the end, he had a mental, a degenerative disease in the end. But I would say to him, don't you really see, I know you're not rich, I know you haven't got this and that, and you're worried about it. Because he wouldn't go out to China because he didn't have any money. He said, what can I take? What can I take back to China? And I said, you've got your family. Aren't you proud of your family? And I've got to say, this family of 8 children, I happen to be an actor. One is run a children's charity in Liverpool for nearly 35 years. He's got an MBE, and he's got the freedom of the city. The last people to get freedom of the city were the Beatles. That's his son. He's got a son who actually became a policeman, for God's sake. One of the high-ranking policemen in England. And I just think, don't you really doesn't this mean anything to you? My mum thought we were all absolutely wonderful. The sun shone out of our bums. But anyway, I recorded my dad over a period of time because he used to tell me these stories, and it didn't make total sense because of his illness. And to cut long story very short, in 2008, I'd written this play called Gold Mountain. And it was based about my dad and myself, our relationship. And you tell me when I've got to shut up. Give me time. No. But it was also about China in the 20th century. And the biggest problem was, the Unity Theatre in Liverpool had asked me to do this. How do you put all that on stage on a budget which the Unity Theatre got? And so I said, basically, I started to write, and I said, look, this is impossible because I don't know how you're going to do this. Now, luckily, Graham Phillips, the artistic director of Unity at that time, happened to be invited to Canada. He met the 3 brilliant men who ran a company called Le Demont, excuse my French, Le Demont, 2 worlds. And they're a multimedia theatre company. And they somehow loved this idea, and I ended up going to Montreal over many years, and we worked on this thing. They came to Liverpool, and they put this world on the stage. Now, I don't have flashy, but I wouldn't know a PowerPoint if I fell over it. But the thing is, if you want to look up, I have this website because my agent said I had to have one, www.davidyip.co.uk. And you can look on it. There's Gold Mountain Archive. You can see the whole thing if you want now, and you can see the Chinese detective. And there's also pieces about why and how it was written. But to cut the story very short again, when we were working on this, and these 3 French-Canadian guys, I said to them, why are you interested in this, about this Chinese guy from China, this Liverpool kid, all set in Liverpool, why are you interested in him? And they said to us, we are the white minorities in Canada. We know what it's like to be a minority, being French-Canadian. And I promise you, there were 3 of them. One did soundscapes things. The other did video and photographs. And Daniel was this amazing director. And between us, we put the show on, and I played my dad figure, and a wonderful actor called Eugene Musella played the sort of me. Now it's not about, well, that isn't about my dad. We're in there, but it's about father-son's relationship. It's about moving, how people move. And I've got, how much longer have I got? A couple of minutes, 5 minutes. But about thinking Chinese, this is one of the most important points. With all what I said before about the Chinese community not really understanding and wanting writing and directing, I personally realized I had to go through a transformation. And for the last 16 years, I've been a Buddhist. Before I was a Buddhist, I had a lot of anger in me. I had a lot of anger and arrogance. And when it reflected in my relation to my dad, because basically I thought my dad was an absolute waste of space, which he was in a sense. Any bad decision he made. But when I look back and I've got these tapes and thought, I've got to work on this play, I become a Buddhist, and instead of looking at his material from anger, I looked at it and said, my dad was an opium addict by the time he was 14 years old in China. Sorry, by the age he was 12 years old in China. And he'd had to leave his hometown, got into Hong Kong, and in 1941 he was bought a place by a gangster on a boat that was going out, and he ended up in Liverpool, and about 6 months later he was on Atlantic convoys. So I kept saying to myself, if that happened to me, how would I react? What would I be like? I would be just a smooth, liberal, actor thinking, I'm as fucked up as he was. What would I be? So rather than just thinking this guy's a waste of space, I started to ask, what would have happened? Why? And that was a lovely, wonderful exploration to make. And because of Gold Mountain, and it's only been seen, it's been seen around many countries, but by very small crowd of people. That's why we made the DVD not for public use, but it was for international producers to see if they could see the show. But now the show, as a theatrical piece, is finished. So you can watch it, and if anyone's interested, and I'd love you to watch it, I'd love your feedback. But what happened in Liverpool, when we opened it in Liverpool, was that suddenly local people, and my experience of working with local people on documentaries was, round a table in their house with a cup of tea, they would tell you the most amazing stories. This is why this project is so important, because they have got people to speak. And for our community, this is the voice we need, And they tell me fantastic stories, they show me photographs and this and that. And you go, right, can I put this on film? Can I put it on tape? No way, no. But you see, again, I took 20 years to tell my story. So what Gold Mountain has done, it's opened up. People came to see the play. My own family came to see. My parents were dead by then. But my own family came. My biggest worry. We got the most amazing reviews when it opened. All I could think, oh God, what are the family going to say? And they liked it. It's a quite an emotional piece, but they liked it. But what it's done, I've had people come, old and young, come to the play. I've had them write to me. I've had them they've sent me stories. And it's given permission in a way to open a little door. And I think that's for me, in going back to the theme of thinking Chinese, that's what I'd like to see happen more. I think some of the things I've heard on the papers that people have given have been fantastic. And we need more of that. We need the academic, real rigor of looking at us. But equally, it's these things here that are very important. It's getting people, Vivian's story is incredibly inspiring to me. I never got to the point where I could speak the language. And I've tried and tried and tried. And I realize it's frustrating. But actually, I am a great example for British Chinese. I'm a British Chinese, for being British Chinese, because I love my country, I love my thing, but I don't, and you were talking about not thinking about becoming white. Wanting to be white. I don't want to be white. Now, some people say to me, God, you don't sound very Chinese. It's correct. So, and I don't have my little accent until I have a few drinks. But my brothers do, And that doesn't matter. You just come from Liverpool. It doesn't mean I've got to sound a certain way, look a certain way. I am a British Chinese, I've got this, I thought I had an English accent. My God, you've got a great one. But you know what I mean? And it's getting people to understand that this box you put us in is too small, it's not real. and the opportunity you've got if you took the time, gave opportunity, which Yellowware Theatre is doing constantly with their dim sum night, encouraging young writers, encouraging writers, I think. So I think I've said enough now, but I hope it's of interest, but thank you for the opportunity.